Hello guys! Today I decided to make a video about watercolor papers. I would like to talk more about difference between cheap and expensive paper and how to choose the right one. If you already started with watercolors and buying supplies for it, I'm sure you have some difficulties to decide which one to buy. If not, and you are just thinking to try watercolors, I hope you will find some useful information here. First thing you need to know about paper is there are lots of brands and types. Just look into some bigger store with art supplies and you won't have any idea what you should buy and why. Let's begin with some basic informations you can find on any paper block. The paper is not used only for watercolors, so that is the most important thing. It has to say watercolor paper. Then it is good to know the weight of the paper. I prefer 250 or 300 grams. Then there is a type, press type. It can be hot pressed or cold pressed. We will talk about this later. This one is made of cotton, it's acid free, there are 20 papers in one block, and here is also the size. Sometimes there is also a shade of paper. This one is in traditional white, so it's basically yellow. Now let's talk about it in details. We can buy papers in single sheets or in blocks. The advantage of blocks is the glue. The sheets are glued at the edges so the paper does not have to be stretched. It's also easier for transport to have a paper in a nice block with a hard backside. You have all information about the paper on the cover and you can't mix it with other papers. The weight of the paper tells us how thick it is. When a paper is heavy, we can paint on it without stretching and it won't get wavy. This is one of the biggest problems when it comes to watercolors. I'm sure you know it from school, where you had very cheap supplies and you got angry and frustrated because you thought you are not able to paint. But without a good paper, you are just not able to make a good painting. In my case, this school experience is caused I returned to watercolor only 3 years ago saying, well, I can try it. Then I realized the supplies really matters and I was able to make great results with good paper and paint. Hot pressed and cold pressed paper. The basic difference is in structure. Hot pressed paper is very smooth, without texture. It's suitable for detailed work. It makes sharp edges and the water doesn't suck up into it quickly. It's harder to make a big solid areas on it. Cold pressed paper has a structure with little bumps which allow the water to stay in, so it spreads evenly. You can also paint details on this paper, but they may not be as sharp as on hot pressed paper. Also, you can make an effects with texture on hot pressed. Acid-free paper means it's archival. It's meant to last centuries in a good condition. There are also quality grades. This paper is artistic, but if you're a beginner, you can start with student's quality until you improve your skills. For sketches and simple paintings, I use the cheapest paper. But you have to know, not every time the cheapest means it's bad. You can buy also handmade paper. It can be unpredictable, so it's more suitable for experienced artists. This is the first type of paper I've used. It's quite cheap and it's quite good quality for the beginner. It has nice structure, so it's cold pressed. It's good also for details, but the grains of the paper makes the details look not as sharp as with hot pressed paper. Also, we can see some white parts like grains on the surface. It makes dark color brighter. But it's good for a simple painting like this one. If you are more experienced, you are able to make better results even with this type of paper. This is my favorite paper because I can use it not only for watercolors but also for sketches, drawings or ink. It's not expensive, it's recycled. And here are some paintings. Very nice details, sharp edges. This is a good paper for sketches, drawings, for beginners, for artists. It has beautiful white color, but it gets quite wavy if you paint with a big amount of water, so it has to be stretched. But if you don't mind it gets wavy, your results may look like this. And here we go with another block, Sonnet. It's also one of those cheapest, and it's quite heavy. It has nice structure from one side, and from the other is softer. It's this one. We can see it's not yellow, not white. It's kind of, I would say, blue, which is very interesting. But it's not one of my favorite papers because when you paint, the result is a bit dark. It may be good for beginners, but I don't recommend it. Now let's take a look at other Fabriano paper blocks I have. This one is not expensive, it's hot pressed with a really smooth surface. If you want to draw and paint sharp details, this paper makes them very bold. Colors can be amazingly bright on it. Here are some examples. Painting on this paper is more like spreading the color on some non-absorbent artificial material. It's a very different experience if you are used to work with cold pressed paper more. Also, if the paper is made of cellulose, not cotton. I like this paper also because it won't get wavy while painting, and for me it has a very nice shade, not too yellow. So if you want hot press paper in a very good price, I'm sure you will love it. More expensive hot pressed paper blocks by Fabriano I have are fully made of cotton. The surface is less smooth when we compare it with the previous paper. And I would say all the features of hot pressed paper are less visible with this type. Again, just when I compare it with the previous block. I have this one in two shades, traditional white, which is yellow, and extra white, which is not truly white, but it's closer to it. I use this type often for small paintings of animals. I enjoy sharp edges and deep colors you can achieve on it. And the last block by the same brand is cold pressed. It's lighter and again it's traditional white. It has a pleasant structure, not too obvious. You can easily paint bigger areas on it and the paint will spread evenly. It's very good for big paintings. I use this paper most often. I have some more blocks by different makers. These two are similar, cold pressed, more cellulose than cotton. They are heavy in a nice white shade. They soak the water quickly and you can feel it's a paper. Those fully cotton feel different, thicker. This smaller block has more visible structure. It's suitable for simple paintings with less details. It's easy to make these dry brush effects on it. Both can be both in various sizes. And the last two blocks I have are by the same maker, Guardi. This one seems to contain bigger amount of cotton. It's similar to this Fabriano block. Color is almost the same and structure is rougher here. Both blocks have glued edges, but with this one you need a knife to separate single sheets. I ripped a few papers till I figured out how to cut it correctly, but it's not a problem, the paper is really good. And the last one is also my favorite. It's a bit different. I got it for Christmas. This is it. I have only a few sheets left. It's heavy, 300 grams, cellulose based, with some interesting structure, not those little bumps we could see on the previous cold press papers. It feels softer too. I was told it's a very popular paper and I quickly understood why. Very sharp edges of painted areas and bold lines. Dark colors are deep enough. Watercolor effects can be achieved easily on this paper and it won't get wavy. In conclusion, if you're a beginner without previous artistic experiences, you don't need the most expensive paper. From those I have, I would recommend these three blocks. They all have different nature, they are cheap but not inferior, and you won't be sorry to waste it on your first attempts. After you learn some basics, you can continue with more expensive papers. If you already paint with watercolors, I hope you got some inspiration in this video and maybe it helped you to decide which paper block to try next. Thanks for watching.